Welcome to Inside Tennessee, along with my colleague John North. I'm John Becker. Glad you're with us to recap the election that was. We're talking about the primary election, and we're focused right now on Knox County, and I want to begin with introductions. Chris Davis, who's the administrator of elections in Knox County, is our guest to talk about turnout. Chris, always good to see you.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Susan Richardson-Williams is a Republican, runs her own PR firm. Great to have you with us.
Good morning.
Don Bosch runs his own law firm. He's a Democrat.
Good morning.
Let's go to the numbers right away. Kevin is our director. Let's put them up. For 2018, this was a similar primary, and you see the totals for early voting. Keep 26,000 in your head, and then the total votes 49,000. Now let's go to this year. The early vote count 32,500, total votes 55,000. Chris, let's start with you. What do you make of turnout this year?
Early voting was fantastic, up about 30 to 31%. Election day almost exactly down to just a few hundred, exactly the same as 8 years ago. I don't know what to take of that. We had beautiful weather yesterday, or excuse me, on election day. And so absentee votes were about the same, maybe a few more now than there were 8 years ago, which post-COVID doesn't surprise me. But frankly, very pleased with early voting, and then very surprised by election day. Based on the math, I was planning on 28 to 30,000. We ended up right under 22, and so that was it was a little bit shocking. And talking to my poll workers all day, they were bored. They wanted voters, and unfortunately, we didn't provide them.
You did a great job in your team of breaking down who was voting early, and in terms of ages, people age 60 and above voted at a 2-to-1 rate as people who were younger than that. Explain that, and whether you think we're going to see that in terms of election day as well.
I think those numbers will hold, absolutely. And that's anecdotally, you go to the polling places, that's what you saw, and that's what you see in most elections, absent a presidential election.
Well, that's the reason they call it an early bird special.
Yeah. Well, but I do think, I just think it's one of those things where they're focused on the issues. They're focused on these things, and we joked in training. We trained 700 workers for this. Raise your hand if you haven't seen a yard sign this cycle. Excuse me. They're everywhere. If you didn't know an election was going on, you weren't paying attention.
We'll dive into this race in a little bit, but Gina Oster, who is the incumbent in 3, lost by an 11-vote margin. For an administrator of elections, that's a nightmare.
That's absolutely, yeah. We don't like close elections. We like blowouts, and certainly it's bumming to me because that District 3 County Commission probably has somewhere between 25 and 28,000 registered voters, and about slightly over 55,000 showed up to vote. There's about 20,000 voters plus who, if you had 12 more, could have decided that election in a different manner.
Can you draw any conclusions as to whether this election day was an outlier or maybe a trend of things to come?
Well, just strictly from a percentage perspective, I'd like to think it's a trend to come. I love early voting. You guys all know that. I'm not a big wait till election day guy because inevitably all of my problems seem to happen on election day. It was beautiful weather. Yeah. I hope it doesn't hold just from turnout perspective, but certainly I did like the fact that early voting was up 30%. We've added one location in the last couple of years. Not so we may end up adding one more before 2028 or by 2028. So just because it's really nothing bad about early voting, I'm really glad that people took advantage of it.
I will ask you this real quick because we learned that some, at least Monroe County, has the convenience voting. Mm-hmm. Would there ever be any interest in Knox County going to something like that?
Absolutely, no. And essentially all people hear the word convenience voting and they get really scared. There's about, I think, 7 or 8 counties in Tennessee that currently do this. All it is early voting on election day.
Right.
You would base it essentially on one polling place per every 10,000 residents in your county. So Knox County would probably be minimum looking at about 30,000. You're probably talking more like, 30 locations. You're probably talking more like 35, but it's the exact same concept as early voting. You vote anywhere on election day. This really helps when people who maybe live in one side of the county could vote in the other, or they happen to find themselves in one section of the county. I'm just going to vote there. I know that in places, particularly, I'll give you one example that's been super successful since 2018 is Rutherford County, Murfreesboro.
Right. Big
place. They kill convenience voting and they love it.
Interesting.
And so I could certainly see us going to that in the next few years. Absolutely.
Chris Davis, we always appreciate the perspective. We'll cut you loose for now. We're going to hear the breakdown from the election from Don and Susan right after this. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Back on Inside Tennessee, you're looking at the results of the Knox County mayor race, and you see Betsy Henderson, the clear winner in this one. We'll break down why Larson J. lost and why Kim Frazier came in third. But first, let's hear from the winner and the man she will face in August.
the first order of business that I would like to do is create that STAR Commission. We're going to put that together, and that is a commission of local business owners, local citizens who are going to do a deep dive into the budget and see ways that we can cut back. I think we can always cut back, whether it's as families, businesses, large organizations.
And so addressing the issues with development when it comes to housing and making sure that it's done in a responsible way where we are, putting that development higher density in areas where we have the infrastructure already in place to support it, and stopping the, kind of endless sprawl outward into the county where there's not enough infrastructure, making sure that we're engaging our constituents and that they have a clear understanding of what's going on with every tax dollar that the county is spending.
Beau Hawk is a leader in terms of the labor movement, and he will face Betsy Henderson in August. All right, let's break down the primary results because we saw 3 strong Republican candidates, 2 sitting Knox County commissioners in this race. Susan, what stood out to you?
Well, Betsy's victory, the margin of victory. I think we all talked about on our earlier shows that we felt like she was gaining momentum in the last couple of weeks, but the margin was incredibly strong. I'll give her kudos. I think they had a message, a strong message, no new taxes, and that always sells well. And they had a good ground game. I had people knock on my door a couple of times for Betsy, the only one of the 3 candidates that knocked on our door. So kudos. I said she ran a really smart campaign.
Don?
I can't disagree with what Susan said. Betsy got her base out, got her votes out. Obviously the most conservative of the 3 Republican candidates. I think Larson lost a little momentum at the end. I think he may have alienated some everyman, everyday voters, so to speak. It seemed very polished, almost too polished. It had a little feel at the end towards, while he won, but it kind of felt a little Mike Ragsdale-ish to me, and I think that might have hurt Larson a little bit. Obviously, we're all friendly with everybody in this race, but certainly with Larson. I know he was terribly disappointed, and the thing that's going to be, I suppose, sort of sad is I'm not sure Larson will remain in politics after this. He's been a really strong and a good voice for us, and while we disagreed on many things, he's done a good job leading.
John, I want to get to you about the early vote because you read into that a little bit of a pretense of what was coming.
Well, it felt like the conservative candidates did a fabulous job, sort of, let's get out there early and vote. I just thought they did an outstanding job. I think there's something else that we can observe about that, and it's not like the Democrats really put their thumb on the scale. Now that we have the numbers, we can say that didn't really matter much at all. So
this thought that Democrats crossed over to vote for Betsy is just ridiculous because they thought Betsy, and it's true, I think Beau Hawk has a better chance of beating Betsy than he would have Larson. But that just didn't happen. If Democrats crossed over, so to speak, they went over to vote in the sheriff's race.
Right.
Another big race. You mentioned it, Don. I want to go to the sheriff's results, and we saw 4 strong candidates, all veterans of law enforcement, face off against each other. All had the moxie to do this role, and we want to show the winner of that is Brent Gibson. If we can show that graphic just on our air so that our viewers can take that in for a moment, because he won pretty handily in this one, more so than a lot of people thought. You see the percentages there. Susan, before we hear from him, just explain what you're seeing there in the splits.
Well, again, that was a much bigger margin than I think any of us thought would happen, because the sheriff, current sheriff, Tom Spangler, had endorsed David Ambert. And so I think a lot of people thought David would win, but Don didn't. Don thought all along that Brent was going to win it. And I think he appealed to a younger group of voters, and his playing football at Tennessee didn't hurt.
I want to stop there, Don. We'll get your impressions in just a second, but I want to play this piece of sound we heard on election night. Brent Gibson did play with Peyton Manning for UT, and here's a little moment he shared with our reporter, Andrew McClone.
Sheriff, a thing for you too is you played for UT, and obviously you were the center for Peyton Manning too. So I guess I got to ask you, what is do you have to call Peyton the sheriff anymore, or does he have to call you the sheriff?
Hey, listen, he's earned that, and I'm going to let him keep that. But there could be 2 sheriffs in town.
Two sheriffs in town there on election
Not the
night.
sheriff yet.
No.
Listen, I don't think that sheriff's going to fit Brent. That shirt is going to
Yeah.
fit Brent. He's a bigger guy than that little thing was.
Don, your take on his win?
I thought all along he was he emerged after the first few weeks. First few weeks after Bernie Lyons passed, is really, I thought, the guy that could come through this. I might say that we stood offset a couple weeks ago, and I said I thought that Brent would win this race about 14 points, and that's exactly where it was. I remember we were all sitting there talking about it. You were very much believed that David Amber would win. I thought David Amber would be in second.
And he was, but it was
he
a big margin.
It was a big margin.
Yeah.
Brent will do a good job. It really will be a breath of fresh air in the department. It'll be interesting to see what he does.
John, just for perspective, all of the three of you know this, but for our viewers who don't, just how powerful this position is in Knox County.
Well, you've got hundreds of employees, which means you have great political power
900,
just sort
I
of
think.
built in. You've got a great big budget, and you usually have the willing ear of the county mayor when you come calling, asking for some more money. So you're high visibility, you get to be the good guy. The bad part of the job, I've always thought, is you have to run the stinking jail.
Well, and you know, you don't report to anybody but the voters every 4 years.
In other parts of this election, we did see some shockers in terms of results. Susan, what stood out to you? We talked a little bit about the Gina Oster race, but anything else?
Well, that race for sure, because the incumbent lost and by 11 votes. And again, it points out how close races have been in Knox County, so it's important to vote. The other one was the incumbent on the school board, Christy, and she lost by more than, I think, 60 or 70 votes. It wasn't a lot. It was fairly close. But no, people did not see that one coming. So two incumbents. Again, was there an anti-incumbency, or is it just the candidate?
Don, we saw on the Democrat side, Reverend Butler went down. He was an incumbent on your side.
He did, and I think that's because whether it's Democrat or Republican, I think there's a little growing bias against incumbency. People want change, sometimes even when change may not be warranted, and it'll be interesting. I think that, I mean, that race is going to be a Democratic seat. It always has been. So there'll be a change on the school board, but it'll be for the positive. I think that's a good thing. School board's going to be a little more conservative, likely, than it has
So is
been.
County Commission.
And so is County Commission, if it holds. But there's a few contested races on our side, so we'll wait and see what happens.
We will dive into more of those. We've got to take a quick break on Inside Tennessee. Back with more perspective on this recent primary election right after this. Back on Inside Tennessee, historic action happening this week in the state legislature, an abrupt special session called to redraw the congressional maps. I want to walk you through this just a little bit. On the top there are the 9 congressional districts in the state of Tennessee as they've existed for quite some time. And I want to direct your attention over to the far left. That is Steve Cohen. He is the lone Democrat in Tennessee, and he served in that district right around the Memphis area for almost 20 years. Okay, drop your eyes to the map below it and look what happens to District 9. Instead of centered around Memphis, it stretches out almost 200 miles into Middle Tennessee and north, and you see what happens to the other districts as well. They take some turns and shifts as well. I do want to mention that in Districts 2 and 3, those are East Tennessee, and District 2 we know is Congressman Burchett's seat. That doesn't change. District 3 doesn't change much either. That's Congressman Fleischman's seat. There was concern that perhaps we'd see Roane and Anderson County drift into District 2. Not on this map. All right, Don, this all centers on a U.S. Supreme Court decision tied to the Voting Rights Act dating back to the mid-'60s. What do you make of the redrawing?
Well, the redrawing, they're traveling under the premise that the Supreme Court gave them that you cannot redraw simply to eliminate a racial element in the election, but you can redraw for political reasons. So we heard Cameron Sexton, Speaker Sexton, say this is for political reasons. This is for political reasons.
And population.
And population. Okay, great. But there is zero question that they are just fracturing the minority vote in Memphis. That district was originally created to encompass Shelby County. It is our only majority, Memphis is our only majority black city in this state, and they have eliminated that voice and tried to remove, they're going to put 9 white men or women in Congress and no voice out of that community. It is wrong, and hopefully that will drift past the Roberts decision, and the courts will not allow this redistricting to happen.
Susan, we heard pressure from as far up as the White House to make this happen, not just now, but yesterday.
There was definitely pressure from the president on the governor and probably on the speakers and lieutenant governor as well. But the governor made the decision to call a special session, and so they've been having it all this week, and the map has been redrawn. We'll see what happens with that. What's really interesting is they also passed a bill that says you can live outside the district and still run, but it's only for this election. It's a one-time thing.
And explain why.
Well, because obviously we've had laws that say you have to live in the district. And so this one time, because people can now apply to run. They can go get a petition tomorrow and get 25 names on it and get that petition approved and run in these districts. I could run for 9th District Congress if I wanted to. I don't have to
move
live
there. In the next
afterwards,
election.
if I want,
by the
I'd
way,
have to
they did a
move.
fine job of little blips capturing candidate seats in another form of gerrymandering to make sure they can preserve the Republican candidates for
They
this
did
election.
some of that. What I find really interesting, West Tennessee, when you saw those 2 maps, rural West is really changed dramatically. And obviously, Memphis now has 3 congressional districts, just like Davidson County has.
Well, it's not even a Memphis district anymore. It's a part of Memphis and the rest of rural conservative West Tennessee.
It goes, the 9th District goes from Shelby over to part of Williamson and part of Murray County.
Just so you know, that's about 200 miles. If you look at the length of Congressman Burchett's district, which I did top to bottom, it's about 100 miles. So that gives you the sense of this.
The Speaker pointed out in his conversations
I can't wait for this, Susan.
that the Democrats did that to Tennessee back when they did redistricting to the 4th Congressional District from the Virginia border all the way to my home county, Hardin. That is farther than 200 miles.
And my response to that is going to be the Democrats did it, but they were not trying to eliminate an entire minority population in doing it. It was political. It was not racist, which is what's happening now.
Your minority population will continue to vote. They're just going to be in different districts. And they will never win.
They will never have representation that looks like them and shares their issues.
Well,
ever.
we'll find out.
What happened to Ogle's 5th? That thing was already weirdly shapen, and once again, it's a different look.
It is a very different look.
He's always struck me as probably the Republican most vulnerable in Tennessee.
Probably, and he has a very strong Democrat candidate against him, and I don't know yet. Looking at the map on Murray County,
who it benefits.
There was some discussion that the legislature did address. Trying to help Andy Ogles out in that. I don't know if they accomplished that, but that is the race that Democrats are trying to pick up.
We're going to take a quick break. Lastly, our recap of the election night that was and any other standouts from election counties beyond Knox, which we saw some surprises. Back with that discussion right after this. As promised, you could say some upsets or at least some surprises outside Knox County on election night for this primary. John North, run them down for us.
So here is one that I do think sort of surprised us, the Knox County mayor's race. We thought that
Rob
Mathis, the incumbent, probably, he had high visibility as a result of the storm, that might be enough to kind of ride him back in. We learned that wasn't necessarily the case. He lost. There was some suspicion in Anderson County among veteran Republicans, that Mayor Terry Frank would lose. Been in there since like 2012. That was not the case. She won. And then Monroe County Sheriff, the incumbent mayor, did very, very well in his race. The incumbent sheriff did not do very well in his race, and there was a lot of unhappiness with him.
An unlikely split, as we've talked about through.
Odd split.
Susan, Blount County, we saw one vote decide one race.
Yes, but the mayor's race is one that we thought maybe Jerome Moon had been a state representative, might come out because of just name ID. But he did lose that seat to Jared Anderson. And so that would be a new face. Ed Mitchell's been there a long time, and so.
I think there is a Democrat, but I don't know that person, I mean, we'll have to see.
I'm assuming that Blount County usually goes Republican.
And
so.
the race decided by one vote was County Commission.
County Commission.
Yes.
Right.
All right, let's move to the big picture in Knox County, because a lot of people are wondering, how will this primary, and again, we're going to see a general in August, but if things shake out the way some people think they may, what does that do to Knox County Commission, and what does that do to the Knox County School Board?
Well, if it shakes out as predicted, and again, it doesn't always shake out that way.
Right.
Both bodies, school board and county commission, will be a bit more conservative, particularly in the sense as it relates to development. There is a greater anti-developer sense that may be elected to county commission, and that's going to matter because we've had a lot of development. There's this 20-year plan that Mayor Jacobs worked so hard to get. Yeah, and it's going to be in jeopardy, and it's going to grind things down. And unfortunately, as a community, we have this bad habit of we put something really good and thoughtful in place, and then the next batch comes along and they just completely toss it up. And I hope we keep the best parts of it, at least, if not all of it. It was a good, conscious effort run by Republicans, but now there's a different stripe of Republican that may have a greater influence now in county commission.
To that point, John North, the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, is out there. You can go review it on the site right now, but a lot of developers have some concerns about this, and we're going to see this current county commission take this up, and it's one of Glenn Jacobs' pressing priorities is to pass this thing before he has to leave August from office. What do you make of what we'll see in the next few months?
Honorable intentions, but we'll just have to see. I mean, there may be some. Here's what I'm interested in. Will there be some candidates who are determined to be so far to the right concern that they become targets sort of from the other side to say, you can't let that person win?
Susan, what do you make of it?
Well, it looks like you're going to have 4 new county commissioners. And clearly, I think most of them are more conservative than the folks that were in there prior to that.
4 on a body of 11. You essentially, if you want to control that, you need 6 votes.
You need
11
6,
people.
and we've got some conservatives on there already. So you very well could see a shift in county commission. And Betsy Henderson, I think I'm right, came out against that Advance Knox plan. So you've got a mayor who's got concerns about development. You've got some new county commissioners who have concerns about it. So we may be in a whole new world here when it comes to planning and development.
We're going to drive up housing prices because we're not going to be able to build anything new for the people that do want to come here, sometimes even because they like the politics here that are predominantly red. It's going to cause problems.
And you won't be able to pay for infrastructure.
That's right.
Well, no new taxes. We heard that from assuming Betsy wins in August.
Several directions.
So in the 90 seconds we have left, Don, Susan, Bo Hawk, Betsy taking each other on for this August general election. Betsy Henderson, what does she need to do to win, Susan?
What she did in the primary, and that's turn her people out, and she needs to knock on doors, which she also did in the primary. I don't think they're going to take this for granted. They'll be foolish if they do, because Democrats are going to be engaged. They're fired up. They think they're going to win in November, and they saw some of the defeats that happened here in this primary. So you cannot take this race for granted.
Don, 30 seconds.
Yeah, Bo Hawk is a very good candidate. He's skilled. He knows that he will knock on doors. He hadn't had to knock on many yet. He had no opponent in the primary. You're going to see a huge groundswell, and of course, a lot of independents and even maybe a few moderate Republicans are not happy with their candidate and are going to consider voting for Bo Hawk. We'll see how he does.
John, closing thoughts on turnout.
Well, come August, we'll obviously have the state and federal primary, which will help. Will that sort of change the dynamic or the chemistry? That'll be interesting to watch as well.
We appreciate you tuning in for Inside Tennessee and our analysis. We'll hope to see you next week right back here, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.